All right, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. I'm John,
And I'm Jack.
and this week we are reviewing the greatest beer run ever. And Jack, this was your choice, and I have to say, I was I was very surprised by how impressed I was by this film. I
Could you elaborate on that? Like, what were you expecting from this film? Be completely honest with me.
I okay. So one, the title of it is a very kind of like frat boy title for a movie. And the other part of this too is the movie poster for this film is just kind of over the top and ridiculous. I was honestly expecting like National Lampoon's like Vietnam Vacation vibe, and I was pleasantly surprised. There, I actually found myself having emotions, which I know is gross, but
Ew.
no, I actually I felt a great deal out of this movie, and actually found myself critically thinking quite a bit, which was way more than I was bargaining for.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This movie's been on my to watch list. It's been on my watch list for a while now, and this podcast gave me the perfect excuse to finally watch it. And even though I had to make another account, and for those of you that have been paying attention at home, I really hate making new accounts. Like, whether it's for video games, for anything, I hate making new accounts. Like, you got to put in the email, you got to think of a new password that you'll remember, and when you don't remember it, you're effed. And it's just dumb. But for this movie, I actually did the impossible and made a new account for, was it Apple TV or Apple Plus or whatever it's called?
Yeah, Apple TV is where this movie's at, which that
Yeah.
also, like, don't get me wrong, I like this isn't the first time we've had to deal with a pale wall for a film, and I'm willing to hurdle that, but I'm with you in the whole I don't want to create a new account because let's be honest, like the 6 month free trial thing, I'm just going to forget that I have it, and then I'm going to start getting charged for it, and then I'm going to get pissed off in 6 months. Like, why the fuck did I just get a $7 charge or whatever?
Yeah, I still
But
haven't canceled that. I probably should. But yeah, like if it's
small price to pay.
a small price to pay indeed. Like if it's a $3 or $4 paywall like the Alamo was, I don't give a shit. Like I don't even think, like I spend that and don't even think about it and I'll pay it. But making an account is just, oh, it's just so tedious.
I guess you could have gone to Walmart and like bought the DVD of this, but
Is it out on DVD?
I think so.
I mean,
I don't know.
possibly. So I
Here's the
heard. Go ahead.
I was going to say, here's the thing: is I honestly don't think even if this film was free, I would have gone out of my way to watch it if it wasn't for this show.
Why is that?
Like that's like it's just going back to my original point of just the title of it and the premise of the film. Like it just doesn't do it justice for how good it actually is. Not to mention, I'm not much of a Zac Efron guy, but
I was
I
gonna get
also
into that later, but I agree with you.
I thought he had a quite a stellar performance in this.
Oh, in my opinion, he killed it in this. And that seems to be the consensus, is that he went above and beyond for this role. And like I was even reading some behind the scenes for this, and the real Chick Donahue, he had never heard of Zach Efron before this movie.
I'm trying to imagine an 80-year-old man watching a High School Musical to find out who's playing him in a movie.
And it was his granddaughter that told him who he was, and even he was on the fence about it. But he personally told Zach Efron that he knocked it out of the park on this one. And I completely agree. Zach Efron did amazing. And like you were saying before, I wasn't a huge Zach Efron fan. Like I thought he was the pretty boy Disney actor type. But no, he showed his chops in this movie, in my opinion. And I really should stop saying that. But anyway, I first heard about this story through Reddit of all places, and it was the Today I Learned subreddit, and it talked about this and how this one dude on a basically a bet in his hometown or home borough, whatever
Burrow, whatever,
neighborhood,
hit his neighborhood.
neighborhood, his neighborhood watering hole, a pub, like this drunken bet that he made to deliver beer to his friends in Vietnam, and he actually did it. And that intrigued me because holy shit, how do you pull this off? And I like I did a little bit of digging and found that they made a movie about this, and not only a movie but a memoir about this dude's adventures. And that really interests me because holy shit, like if you were to pull this off, this is all you would be able to talk about for decades with your drinking buddies at the bar, right? Like, remember that time I delivered, like, you think that's bad? Remember that time I delivered beer to my friends in Vietnam?
I love the, like, I know it's like way down the line in the movie, but my favorite one of my favorite scenes in this movie is when he's sitting at the hotel bar and he's surrounded by a bunch of reporters because he's looking for a way, like, essentially needs a reporter to get him around the country, or that's his first idea before he goes on his CIA shenanigans. But you know, he's chewing them out because he's still very pro war, pro military, and all that. Um, and he's like, all you guys ever do is talk shit. You're not helping anybody. It'd be nice if you like just said something nice every once in a while. And they're like, what are you doing? It's like, I am bringing my friends beer. And they're like, they have beer here, right? Like,
And I actually did research this, like what beer they had available. And the answer was predominantly whatever they could drink that the logistics could get to them. But there was this Vietnamese beer. I think it was, I don't know how to say it in Vietnamese, nor will I even attempt it, but it's like translates to 33. And that became a bigger brand in America after the war when returning veterans would ask for it. And it's a whole thing here now. But for our listeners, the beer that he smuggled to Vietnam was Pabst Blue Ribbon, which is what we're drinking tonight in honor of this movie.
we finally coordinated it.
Yeah, after how many weeks of you haranguing me for getting with the program? Actually, no, I don't want to hear it because I drank Pacifico
I
last week
I
for the
gave
Alamo.
you I gave you props for Pacifico last week.
For our listeners, he's beaten me. He's hit me for not drinking themed beer and alcohol. It's an abusive relationship we share for this. Not really, I'm kidding, but yeah, I actually drank Pacifico for the Alamo review, which that was a mid movie, but that's not what this podcast is about. This podcast is about the greatest beer run ever told, which I do believe that this is one of the greatest beer runs ever made in history.
And it was brought to you by Pabst Blue Ribbon, who is also not our sponsor tonight. But if you wanted to be, more than happy to.
Yeah, and I did some more research, and I'm gonna say that a lot, but apparently he also smuggled Schlitz as well. So if Schlitz wants to sponsor us, that'd be great as well.
Imagine after all this time, Schlitz is the company that actually throws $1 our way.
Out of all of them, Schlitz. God. Mm.
Oh, the
But
metal shavings are cutting my throat.
but man, I really relate to a 26-year-old protagonist that's spinning his wheels and just being a lazy piece of shit that wakes up at noon or 3 p.m., then goes out to drink and party, and then does it all again the next day.
I love the fact that he talks this big game, and he does the standard drunk guy thing. He's like, I'm gonna bring our boys beer and show them that we appreciate them. And then the next day
Oh
Everybody's like,
shit.
nobody. It. He's like, I don't know if I can make it work, and everybody's like, it's okay. Nobody actually thinks you're going to. He's like, what do you mean
And
nobody thinks I'm going to?
he takes that personally.
Well,
And they're like,
that's such a guy thing to do. Like,
it is.
yeah, it's like, what do you mean everybody thinks I'm actually a pussy? Like,
Yeah, like there's no amount of encouragement you can do that compares to doubt in a male's mind.
like
Like
I'll fucking show you.
I could spend 50 years saying like, "Oh, DP, you should go to Iraq and make a beer run." No, it'll totally make a difference. But as opposed to uh Mitch thinks you're a pussy. He doesn't think you can get to Iraq with that beer. He thinks you're full of shit. What do you think he's going to do? Like given those two options.
You know what? You're right. I am a pussy. I don't need to go to Iraq.
Oh, I'm making a point, damn it. But also, I was getting to that. Like building on top of the point you gave me, like there is a point in the movie where he pulls some string. Well, he doesn't even really pull some strings. He just he does his job as a merchant mariner, and he goes to the office, and he's like, "Oh, are there any ships to Vietnam?" And he's like, "Oh, well, wouldn't you know it? There's one." And you can see it on his face. He's like, "Oh shit." But he plays it off and he's like, "Oh, well, you probably don't need an oiler or something." Well, that's all I can do really is just an oiler. And he's like, "Oh, well, wouldn't you know it? There's an oiler position open." And he's like, "Fuck." But he plays it off like, "Oh, well, you're probably not leaving anytime soon, right?" He's like, "Actually, we're leaving tonight in 3 hours." And he's like, "God damn it." And that scene, honestly, is one of my top scenes of this movie and possibly of this podcast so far, just of how well Zac Efron acted it. Like, in my
It's the
opinion,
ultimate version of like today
I
when
almost
you're trying to bail out on plans you made with somebody, and you're like, oh, I I'm just not feeling that well. Like when you're trying to think of a BS excuse to text over the phone, and there's literally nothing that you can say, so you end up going to whatever event that you actually didn't want to do.
but like he's offered the position of an oiler on this ship going to Vietnam, and you can tell like Zac Efron knocks it out of the park with how he acted this. Like you can tell he doesn't really want to do this and he's having second thoughts. But god damn it, like a couple minutes ago his friends were like, "Oh yeah, they're saying you're a pussy and you won't really do it." So you know he's getting his arm twisted into doing this. And he does it, god damn it. And that's one of my possibly my favorite scene in this movie is like it's written all over his face like I don't want to do this, but like Lady Luck fell face first into my lap on this occasion, so I have to do it now. And like there's a point where you can tell like there's no going back now. Like I've talked a big game and the stars aligned on this. I have to do this. Yeah.
I will say that one thing I didn't really appreciate about the whole Merchant Marine side of this was we get the scene he's like on the boat and it's leaving, and then it's literally like a half second flash, and then he's immediately in Vietnam. I know it's not too terribly important to the story, but I think it would have been fine to add 1 minute of like seeing him go through the Panama Canal, or just like just seeing the boat transverse a wide ocean, just so we get more of the oh yeah, he's doing this thing.
But at the same time, what would have that added to the movie?
Just just a just an aesthetic, I think.
On okay, yeah, I can
It
see
would
that because even
it
then,
wouldn't have progressed the story any, but it just would have been kind of like a supporting shot that I think could have. I just felt like it was something was missing in that little section, because it's you're talking about he mentions the fact that being on the ship is months of back-breaking labor.
yeah, he was
To
doing double shifts.
Yeah, it would have been I think it would have been helpful just to establish that it's not as simple as like, snapping your fingers and suddenly he's in Vietnam.
And I did kind of have that feeling when I first watched this movie, where like he's in New York and then boom, he's immediately in Vietnam. Like I feel like if they had some time to spare, there could have been like a stopgap there. But what was I gonna say? So, and I also, what I read about this, he's all in real life, the real Chick Donahue had been to Vietnam two or three other times before this beer run. And that helped him because the Mariners were like, "Oh, he's just doing leave. You like, he's done this before. This is the third or fourth time he's been to Vietnam." When and yeah, and that was the story. Is like he's delivering munitions, he's delivering supplies, and blah blah blah. But like, what in your opinion would have added to that scene more, or what it would have added that wasn't already inferred of him traveling or however many thousand nautical miles he said?
Maybe we could have had a little montage, just like a 2 minute montage with some '70s music.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Where we see him working in the engine room, and there's like a rough sea scene, or he's, passing through the Panama Canal. Just a little montage to show the actual weight of this journey to get there.
yeah. And I bet there's a
Which
deleted scene out there of that.
probably,
Now that you
which
say that out loud,
speaking of music, A plus to this movie for not using Fortunate Son. I was
I was gonna
shocked.
save that. And yeah, I was shocked too. A Vietnam movie without Fortunate Son. Oh my god. Somebody call Guinness. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, and the scene where he's like, "Oh shit, I have to do this," and then it immediately jump cuts to him piling the cases of beer next to that duffel bag and him stuffing in all those beers into the duffel bag. And I also did research this as well. And Chick Donahue, he himself doesn't know how many beers he smuggled, but he thinks it's around 60 to 70 beers of Schlitz and PBR into the country.
That is both a lot and also seems like not that much.
Well, it's just a lot to me. Like, you know me, I would have had more than a couple on the way over.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, like 60 or 70 beers is a lot to be carrying around in a duffel bag. But also, if you're thinking, like, if we're looking at this movie where he's planning on stopping to see like five different dudes, like the division on that math starts limiting the number of drinks per person real quick.
And that is something that I was thinking about during the movie, is like he's just giving these beers out wonton. Like, how does he manage this? But there is kind of a limitation on how many beers you can give out, right? But there's also the real life section where he probably didn't give out that many beers to his comrades and whatnot. But more on that later. Um, Him bargaining with his captain for 3 days of shore leave, is that a lot to ask of your captain, especially with the work you've given?
I have no idea. I've never been a merchant marine, but I feel like if you've been at sea for a couple of months, that getting like a day or two off the ship is not out of the question.
Yeah. And the fact that he found that first friend immediately, that seems ridiculous, but that actually happened, where his the first friend on his list was stationed right fucking there. And that was also in the movie. That was like, or no, that was also in real life, where he was like, "Okay, you made your point, dude. Like, just call it quits right now, because this country's fucked. Like, if you try to move to the other friends, you will die." And he tries to talk him out of it, but Chick's like, "Nah, dude, it'll be fine."
I
But
love that this is. I love that this particular part of the story is also where we start the whole him pretending to be a CIA agent thing.
yeah, I was gonna mention that, and that actually happened in real life too, where he's partying with the dude, and then their commander comes in. He sees his immediate subordinate in full uniform, and then just this random fucking guy in khakis and a polo button up, and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just a tourist." And he didn't think anything of it at the time. He just like semi jokingly said that, and then the dude is like, "Oh, well, as you were," and then ran away. And he didn't think about the implications of that sentence until it was explained to him that, oh, they think you're CIA. And that's one of the fastest ways of getting demoted out here is cocking off to somebody higher up than you, and they don't want to risk it. And and I even read this, like, for the rest of his time in Vietnam, like he was going around saying like, "Oh, I could tell you what my rank is, but you wouldn't believe me," or "I can't tell you who I worked for," and like wink at them, and they would just like let him have it. So
That strikes me as a very military or government thing to do, where it's like,
it really is. It really is. And I was joking with my buddies because yesterday I went shooting with them, and one of my buddies shows up in a polo and khakis to shoot an AK-47, and the buddy that brought the AK-47 is a military dude, and we were joking like, "Oh yeah, the polo button-up dude's a CIA agent, and the he's the military dude, and I'm the brown farmer they're teaching to fight America's enemy." and that and that was perfect because the night before I watched this movie, and that was what he was wearing, is like a button up Hawaiian shirt with a khakis. And what was I gonna I was going somewhere with oh yeah, like his buddy was like, "Yeah, dude, just cut it off here. Like, I love you, and this is a good story. You've proved your point. Just go home." But other people in his military squadron were like, "Oh no, this is how you get to what was it, LZ Jane? Yeah, LZ Jane. This is how you get to LG Zane. No, the road's cut off here. You're gonna have to take a helicopter here. No, no, they won't let him here. They'll never let him here. This is how," and blah blah blah. And he eventually decides to go to the hotel, right?
yeah,
And this is where we meet Russell Crowe's character, the jaded, grizzled war correspondent. Let me say, Russell Crowe's come a long way since Gladiator.
he sure has. I thought he did a good job in this one, but he definitely his appearance has changed a lot over the last 20 years, which I guess is something that is true of anybody who ages by 20 years. But um, I don't know. It was interesting to see him in this particular role.
It really was. And I think he added a lot to this movie.
I appreciated the fact that he wasn't like a primary component to Chicky getting around. Like obviously he is a pretty big part later in the movie when the Tet Offensive happens. Um, but when I saw the movie poster for this and I saw that Russell Crowe was going to be involved in it, I thought, like I said earlier, I thought it was going to be like National Lampoon's, Vietnam Vacation. Miranda made a joke to me. She's like, "Is this like is Russell Crowe and Zac Efron doing Bill and Ted's like bogus Vietnam film?" Like, so I was expecting a much bigger role from him, uh, but I think he fit in just right for the amount that he was on screen.
And building on top of that, I want all together now, kids. I did some research, and apparently his character isn't in the book at all. He's not even a character. He was just added into the movie, which, yeah, I guess they needed a vehicle to add that plot drivenness to the movie, and they had Russell Crowe to fill it, to move the plot along. But at the same time, you, did you need it?
I don't know. I So this is where I think the film gets its serious tone or the kind of thought provoking aspect to it. Because when he's sitting down in the bar and he first encounters the journalist, obviously the whole reason he is going on this big adventure is because he sees the protests at home. His sister is one of the protests, and he's on the opposite side of the fence. There's this big dichotomy of either you're super for the war or you're super against it. And at the beginning of the film, Chicky, he says a line that really kind of speaks to that 1940s 1950s vibe of America, which is you know have you ever considered that maybe our government has it all figured out, but they just didn't bother to tell you? it's like oh yeah, the must have been nice to have lived in a time where you could wholly trust your government. But and I would like to say to our FBI agents that I love America, and I have no beef with the government.
At all, right? NSA,
Zero, right? Um,
man.
but um, the thing I wanted to discuss with you or ask you is obviously we see this character progression with Chicky where he goes from being super one side of the pendulum to kind of more center line. Um, you know, you having taken like media and journalism classes in college,
Mm-hmm.
what did you think about the kind of the big argument that was occurring between him and the reporters, which is the reporters are on one side of the fence where you know they they think and believe that they're doing a great service by reporting what they see as the truth and by being honest or what they believe to be honest. They think they're doing the most good and will affect the most change. And Chicky comes at it from the perspective of, yeah, like people need to know this, but also like, would it kill you to share something positive every now and again? Because it's a theme that we see with the protesters and the pro-war people is you know you get a lot of the protester people saying like we're making a change because we're trying to bring an end to the war and that will help the troops because they won't have to fight it anymore. And then you have the pro-war people who are obviously saying you know the first thing they see when they step off an airplane is a sign calling them baby killers. How's that helping them? So I guess, what did you think about the journalism side of this story?
That's what I liked about this film, is the how they portrayed the journalism side of the film, because they even say like, "Oh, we're here to portray the truth and the nothing but the truth and the whole truth." And at the same time, they were feeding into that anti-soldier rhetoric of, "Oh, baby killers," and the yeah, the whole welcome home that a lot of Vietnam veterans got, that in my opinion is still black mark on the whole military service side of it. But at the same time, I like that they talked about how Vietnam was, I think they called it like the first living room war, you know, where
Right.
we like it was in color, in at that time high definition, and it was being broadcast all over the world. And a lot of people really don't understand the phrase "the pen is mightier than the sword," when that was our first reminder of that fact. And that, like what they saw on TV was a drastic change of what they were told was going on in the war from Westmoreland, which is portrayed in the film, by the way, where he's talking like, "Oh, I think we're making a positive change here," but then we see firsthand through Chicky's point of view, people are dying and civilians are getting hurt through this war.
That was there was one scene that I thought was incredibly powerful, and it happens during the Tet Offensive uh, scenes where Chicky and Russell Crowe are running around the town, and you see this jeep get blown up, and a couple of
Oh
soldiers are
yeah.
nearby, and you get the like hazy like shell shock effect, and there's a dude with his arm missing, and like the camera moves over to Russell Crowe, and you see him immediately like pick up his camera and start taking pictures of stuff. um and it's very much the um I don't know if you ever heard the phrase "if it bleeds, it reads" kind of thing, and
I haven't
it
heard that actually.
yeah, it's such a it's just so gross. It's one of those, you know, any other person with in that situation would think I either have to run away from here or I need to help those people. And this particular individual, and granted, it's his job to report the news and to document things, but also you have such a horrendous event, and as opposed to the action that this person takes isn't a positive or a negative, it is purely a bystander kind of thing. And it's my action is I am going to record this because I will profit from this at a later point.
Yeah.
And it's under the guise of I'm here to tell the truth type deal.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people, even today, that are like, "Oh, yeah, the media lost us Vietnam. Like, oh, they're the reason we lost Vietnam," and blah blah blah.
I think some
No, they
guys in
weren't.
black pajamas are the reason we lost Vietnam.
The politicians are the reason we lost Vietnam. The media just talked about it.
Like, I'll be honest, I am not very proficient in Vietnam. I know the bullet points of it, but I don't know it that well. Um, but when I was looking up some stuff for this episode, I came across a little article that was basically, you know, after the Tet Offensive or when this movie is taking place, Johnson was seriously considering trying to work out a withdrawal or negotiations, and Nixon actually tanked it, which
Mm-hmm.
we will get much deeper if we whenever we get around to the Washington Post movie. But um yeah, it's crazy to think about how many years we were involved in that conflict after the fact, knowing that we weren't going to win. Because I think, if I remember correctly, the Tet Offensive occurred in '68 or '69, so we
Mm-hmm.
had been there for like,
68,
so we'd been there for like three, in full force. We had been there for like 3 years.
3, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, um, which our previous wars up to that, Korea had been 3 years. World War II for us had been like
4 years.
four. Yeah, so it was at this time, America in its recent history is used to like, okay, this should be the finish line type deal, and instead we dragged it out for years and years, even though there wasn't going to be an end in sight, really.
It was the start of an era where shit just don't feel like it's resolved. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Where like, okay, World War II resolved within 4 years. Politician does some shithead thing, he either gets killed or resigned. But today, when we get involved in a war, it's like, okay, a quagmire for 10, maybe more years. Politician does something, we talk about it for 4 or 5 or more years, and then it just evaporates. We just let it mellow. We just let it lie. Like it just feels like shit don't get resolved anymore to me.
Yeah, I I'm curious if there's anybody from like the 1800s that has ever felt this way. Um, I'd be very interested to see. I would love to see like a newspaper op-ed from like 1850 with somebody talking this way, but I've yet to see something like that. But because I would hate to think that this is the only time in American history that this is how people have felt. But um, going to the whole negative versus positive thing, one of the common arguments that was brought up is like, oh, the Vietnamese don't even want us over there. And I think that kind of brings up one of the most uh, powerful or affecting moments or scenes or storylines in this film is the character Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, I was gonna bring that up as well.
So Zac Efron, you know he's more or less his life is saved by this police officer crossing guard type dude,
Hmm.
and he just has like a regular 2 minute passerby kind of conversation, but he ends up running into this guy again, and it's weird that this Zac Efron maybe has a total of 4 to 5 minutes of contact with this human being, but he goes from complete stranger to, yeah, you can sleep at my parents' place when you come to the
Yeah,
United States.
I'll
And
buy you a beer, which is important for him.
yeah, um, it's really affecting. And you can see that the character Oklahoma, um, like he is genuinely excited about this. Like he is so stoked, like to the point like he pulls out a notepad, is like, write me your address. Um, so I think that's I think that's great in the sense of, when Chicky is telling the reporters, like, why can't you ever say or display something positive? Like, I think, it's great that we actually see the kind of positivity that he's looking for being displayed by himself, you know? Because because,
The the living room war. That's what it was called.
yeah, I don't think when he's going on his diatribe against the reporters, he's like, "You should write my story about how I'm bringing beers to my buddies." I like, it definitely comes off as like, I want to hear the story about this interaction that I had with this person that was, genuinely kind of pure. And then, obviously there's the massive heartbreak of, having Oklahoma die during
Hmm.
the Tet Offensive scene, which I'll be honest, this is the third time I've ever shed a tear during a film.
I'm proud that I ripped that tear from your tear duct.
You know what the first time I ever cried during a film was?
What?
Finding Dory. I
Why?
just
Oh,
the the scene where Dory gets reunited with her family. It just really pulled at the
okay, yeah.
heartstrings.
That's reasonable.
And then I also shed a tear during The Whale, starring Brendan Fraser.
But don't spoil anything because I haven't watched that myself.
Oh, it's it's a great film, but I would say it's maybe you watch it once in your lifetime and you're good.
Grave of the Fireflies, like, which, by the way, if we ever watch that, I ain't watching it again.
Fair enough.
Have you seen it?
I have not.
Well, save it until we have a video about it because Christ. Yeah, it is a movie. But that's all
So
he's about.
I think there was one other scene that I love. It and it's not, kind of going back to the whole his CIA storyline. I just the I don't know about you, but the moment that cracks me up the most in this entire film is when he finally makes it to LZ Jane and he's like, I need to see so and so. And, his buddy runs through machine gun fire back to the bunker. Um, and in the process of him doing this, Zac Efron's character is like, here, cover me with this tarp. And the
God,
grizzled sergeant's like, no.
no. Yeah, that scene.
And then so his buddy comes into the bunker and then he jumps out. He's like, surprise!
Oh
I brought
God.
I brought you beer. And he's just, the look on his buddy's face is like,
What in the
fucking
fuck?
what?
Yeah,
And then
I knew
and then
you'd bring that up.
the fact he's like, I'm going to murder you. Like,
Yeah, like I was actually stressed during that scene. Like, oh fuck, is his friend going to die? And you see him running back to the bunker, like bullets flying, and he's scared, almost dying.
also, I don't know, like I said, I don't know a ton about Vietnam, but LZ Jane seemed like a super exposed like outpost. Like, didn't
There's
it?
actually a whole thing about that. Um,
Because it looks like the outpost bunker and then like a trench and then there's nothing else there. And to me, I was like, I feel like there has to be more infrastructure to this place than that.
I remember reading somewhere that the Marine Corps and the Army would intentionally keep these bases open even though they knew they were about to be attacked en masse because they knew they could defend it. They just wanted to keep soldiers there and get as many Vietnamese killed to send a message. You know, like we have this point that's not tactically valuable, but you can't take it. That was their line of thinking.
Like sticking their tongue out.
Yeah, it's like it's like holding something from your little brother. Like he wants a popsicle and you
Keep
have it.
away.
Yeah, and you like have your hand on his forehead and you're like, huh, you want it? You want it? It was like that.
That was just one of the things that kind of struck me as a little weird with the way that area was kind of portrayed, but I guess that makes more sense.
And they didn't have the manpower to have round the clock patrols to completely clear out the Viet Cong and the NVA from the areas. So it was just an average part of life, just don't be out after a certain like don't be out after sundown and don't look like you're an officer or else you'll get sniped.
Right. What did we think about Bill Murray's appearance in this film?
I didn't think it was Bill Murray for a second, I'm gonna be honest.
It took me a second too. We got quite a ways into the film, and I think it was like the second scene at the bar that I looked over at Miranda. I'm like, "Is that Bill Murray?" She's like, "Yeah." I love the fact that, and I don't know if this is true, but I remember reading somewhere somebody was talking about how Bill Murray uh, accepts film projects, which is you don't go to his agent and like pitch a movie and then like the agent tries to sell Bill Murray on it, or like you don't go to him directly. There's apparently a fax number that you fax a script to him and maybe he reads it, maybe he doesn't. And the fact that there was a point that Bill Murray received a fax where the first page says the greatest beer run ever, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to read this. Let's see what this is about.
Yeah.
Just blows my mind. It's kind of like when it's imagining him receiving the script for Zombieland, and it's like, fucking what? I don't know. But I thought again, another great performance was Bill Murray as the bar owner. Um, you know, obviously we're used to him being a comedian or being in a comedic role, and like obviously his character does say funny things, but it's interesting seeing him as just kind of a normal person.
Right. Right. Yeah, and him being I think it was even a World War II vet, the Colonel. That's what he was based off of. Real person, but he never reached Colonel. That's just a nickname they had for him. And he was and that scene of him, Chicky realizing like, hey, I should deliver beer to them. That was pretty much what happened in real life. It was just a conversation between him and Colonel. It was like, hey, I should deliver beer to my friends. Yeah, yeah, do it. But another thing that I'd like to note is this movie takes place, well, the point of this movie takes place over like 3 days in Vietnam, and he just bumbles into his friends, then they're hither and thither. But no, apparently he was in Vietnam for 4 months tracking down his friends and just chilling in the meantime.
It's a long time to be there.
It is, and it's weird that he was able to stay there for 4 months.
I think I appreciate the movie put like the 3 day timeline on this because then there's a sense of urgency for him to get to place to
Yeah,
place.
especially towards the end where he's trying to get out of country during the Tet offensive.
Yeah, and it definitely I think it helped keep the movie going, or just like we
A
didn't get
sense of
really hung
urgency,
up.
like you said, yeah.
Yeah. No. So I mean, this film this film I think is honestly very good, and I wish they had named it something different so I would have taken it more seriously.
What, the greatest beer run ever doesn't tickle your fancy?
It's not that it doesn't tickle my fancy, it's just it's not with that title it's not going to be at the top of my list of things to watch. I'm going to it's like we've already made this joke however many times, but I'm going to treat it with the same level of regard as like American Pie at this point. Like American Pie is a fine movie, but also it, I have other things I can watch on a Saturday night.
And like I said, I wasn't expecting, like I was expecting more comedy than drama. And this film is marketed as a dramedy, but the drama parts really hit you. Like
Uh,
when he gets
the
his first taste of war at LZ Jane and his buddy chews him out and puts him in his place, like you know, like you really shouldn't be here. And he takes him to the forward operating base of their ambush point, and they're getting shot at, and like his compatriots are just dumbfounded as to why he's there. And
no, yeah, yeah. I mean the drama parts they they hit so hard that a lot of times you forget that there is a comedy element to this film.
100%. And like that scene where he's just chilling in the bunker, not even trench, with that one dude, and he's like, "Yeah, I made it out of my first tour of duty here, and I just couldn't relate to anyone back home, and I felt guilty, so I came back here, and then I came back here again after my second tour, and then all he can say is just, Jesus Christ."
We'll see that recurring theme in the Hurt Locker, which I'm not
Yep,
looking forward to reviewing that film, but
I have seen that movie.
we'll see how we'll see how long it takes to get around to that one.
It's a decent movie, and there. uh,
Mm,
Oh, what? Do you
yeah.
not like it?
No, not really. And there's a lot of people who don't like it actually.
Well, that's a bridge we'll cross when we get to it. But the crux of my point, God damn it, I gotta stop saying that. But the main point that I'm trying to make, and I gotta stop saying that as well.
The bridge to your
But
argument, I don't know.
shut up. Yeah, okay, the bridge to my argument.
counting chickens and eggs, hand in the bush and birds and stuff.
Yeah, is that he gets more than he bargains for. Like a war zone is, surprise, surprise, an actual war zone when he gets there. And they're grateful for the beers, and he even says it in himself, like, this is the first time I've seen them smile in weeks when you came here and gave us beers. And I was really happy. Actually, that elephant scene where he's walking up that road alone, and all of a sudden the elephants just burst out and almost run him over. That and then
Great
at
jump
like
scare, by the way. Wasn't
one in a
expecting
mil
it.
and 1 in a million chance the dude he's looking for comes down the road in a jeep. Surprisingly enough, that actually happened too, where he just chanced upon his friend one night in a jeep. That, yeah, like that surprisingly actually happened too. And yes, he got a beer. And even then I was like, "Oh, come on, give him a beer." He like stuck his neck out for you. And then he's like, "Oh, wait, hold on, I got something for you." And then chucked him a beer. That was so heartwarming.
I was really hoping that the beer would get chucked into like the rotor blades of the helicopter.
Cuz of course you would.
Here, catch.
God.
Oops. Sorry, that was the last one.
Yeah, and I'm impressed that he kept that close of a count of the beers that he had left. And like it said, everybody that he delivered a beer to not only survived the war, but came back and mostly quit drinking.
Well, I mean, mostly is good enough, isn't it?
Mostly is good enough for me as well.
So I think it might be, unless you have any other points you wanted to make, I think it's about time for some Rotten Tomatoes.
And I have it pulled up. So the critics say that this movie's a 43% on the tomometer, but the audience says this is a 91%. And what do you think?
So I can't think of a more apt rating for this film uh, than to use our good old PBR can. So I would say that this film, I wrong, I thought I was going to agree with the critics on this one, just like right out of the gate. But after seeing this film, I I strongly disagree. I think this is a solid 9 PBR cans and one that is half full. So 9.5, 9.5, 9.5 beer
So
cans for me.
I agree with you. I think this is 9 PBRs and a Schlitz out of 10.
How many Schlitzes equal a PBR?
I don't know, a half, whatever. But what I'm saying is, I agree with the audience on this one. I don't really know why the critics ragged on this movie. It was a good one.
Yeah, you definitely get more than what you're expecting from this film.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that this was our first Vietnam movie. And I'm glad that I'm the one that picked this.
I was going to say, did we? This is our first Vietnam film, and I'm shocked, absolutely stunned that we didn't do We Were Soldiers or Platoon first.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
right? Those are
I
the first movies people think of when they sit here Vietnam movies.
I think even 2 or 3 weeks ago I sent you a message. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about doing We Were Soldiers for my next choice, and then it didn't happen because I changed it to whatever. But
Yeah.
um, I think we ended up doing Down Periscope that week.
Which, again, a movie that is fun to watch and I will die on this hill to defend.
Down Periscope is our is the gold standard for films for us.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but
I was
yeah.
going I was going to get a T-shirt made up with it with two crabs duking it out.
Yeah, I give this 2 crabs out of 2. Duking it out.
All right.
But yeah,
So so next week is my film choice, and I would love to be able to definitively say what next week's film choice is, but we are going to be joined by or at least I believe this is going to happen. We're going to be joined by a special guest next week. Um, what I can say for our listeners is that it will either be a Bridge Too Far or The Longest Day, and we'll keep the details of our guest a secret for now, just to not get anybody's hopes too far up. So, but you can tune in next week to find out which one of those two we actually end up reviewing. So,
Mm-hmm.
which both of them are big. Imagine if Ocean's 11 was a World War II movie. That's basically what both of those are, because they have both of those films have like every big name in Hollywood starring in them, and there's just massive films. I think they're both like 3 hours long, so it's going to be a. I'm very excited for our guests that we're having lined up. I think he'll have a lot of insight to add to the topics. So, um, other than that, do you have anything, Jack?
I have nothing.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review. The stars do matter. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and to all the companies that we name dropped. If you want to send us a DM, I'll give you I'll give you our Venmos. So that being said, I hope everybody has a good week and we've enjoyed having you. I've been John,
And I'm Jack.
and we will catch you next time.
Bye.